All right, I think we're gonna get started. I just gotta say that I love that video. I haven't seen Animal House in so long, and it also reminded me of going to a wedding, and I miss it all. So I got kind of a toga on. I still have a shirt. I'm going for kind of the conservative look. I don't have any pants on. Steve is doing the opposite, where he does have pants on, but no shirt. So welcome to our. I'm going to take these off because I can't see. It was just in team. Welcome to our kind of live Q&A with diabetes experts. Where the theme is, shout, keeping in line with kind of this like back to school, toga party, this kind of thing. But specifically, we're going to start with airing your diabetes frustrations. And we talk about this a lot. I did my opening talk and sharing a lot of times that, guess what, I'm not perfect with type 1 diabetes, that I've had highs, I've had lows. You have to change your pump in the middle of whatever, go home. And there's a lot of things to be frustrated about with type 1 diabetes, and you're not alone. So I'm going to go around the room, have people introduce themselves, and we'll do introductions real quick, and then we'll kick it off with some of our kind of unique frustrations with diabetes, and encouraging you guys to enter your questions into the Q&A part of the Zoom meeting, and we can see what your guys' questions are. We have Dr. Schafer Boeder here, who is on the bottom of my screen, who is going to be kind of looking through these, fielding them, and posing them to the panel. So the chat is more for like, hey, I'm from Arizona, and the question or the Q&A is more if you want to pose questions to the group. So Schafer, since I already kind of introduced yourself, why don't you just introduce you? Why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Schafer. I'm one of the endocrinologists I work with Jeremy and Steve at both UCSD and TCYD, and I'm happy to be here. I do not have type 1 diabetes, so I'm one of those losers. I think Bill has an honorary diabetes degree, so I'm the only one in this group. But anyway, I'll be helping to monitor the Q&A. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us, even with a functional pancreas. So, Bill, to you, since you are also a loser without diabetes, why don't you say hi?
Sadly, I am also one of the losers. I'm Bill Polonsky. I'm a diabetes psychologist. I think I built a whole career about how angry people are about their diabetes, actually. Certainly I've been honored to hear so many stories about how incredibly aggravated and frustrated folks are. I'll tell you just the top two things I hear over and over and over again that we've always heard through all of our group programs and individuals we've met over the thousands of folks. One is, despite your best efforts, you get different results sometimes, that diabetes just doesn't freaking cooperate. And then, of course, the other is not getting a break, the 24/7 problem. This gets really old. I'm sure Kerri might have something to say about that, as well as Steve and Jeremy. So that's me, and look forward to hearing your comments, and hope we can look forward to our chat.
All right, thanks, Bill. And Kerri, what about you?
Hey, so I'm Kerri Sparling, and I live in Rhode Island. I'm a writer and a diabetes advocate, and I have real deal diabetes, unlike the two that just spoke. But yeah, everything that Bill said is I completely agree with. Diabetes gets super old. My diabetes has gotten super old, and I am currently very frustrated with my diabetes because I've spent a lot of time on the phone recently with insurance companies trying to prove to them that I still have diabetes, even though it's been 34 freaking years of having diabetes, but they still want the paperwork. So that's fun.
All right, and then Steve, why do you say hi?
Yeah, Steve Edelman. Pleasure to have all my friends and colleagues on the call today. But I want to give a different frustration from a different viewpoint. I have type 1. I have all the issues that were already listed, and, especially being a 24/7. You don't always try to you can't always stay in range, But I'd say my biggest frustration as a human being, as a diabetes doctor, is treating people who are resistant to the technology when I know it could really, really, really help them with their diabetes, such as CGM.
All right, Steve, but you still got to tell us what frustrates you. You can't just deflect and talk about your patients.
Thank you.
No, I did mention that briefly, but I would say this, that what frustrates me is that I could do really well, give myself kudos, do those little celebrations like you spoke about in your opening lecture, but the minute you slip, your time in range goes from 85 to 62. And it's just frustrating. And I hate lows because I always overtreat, even though I know what I'm supposed to do, but I still feel low and I'm still eating and drinking. And then I go high and then I try to correct and then I overcorrect. So I get on the roller coaster. So that to me irks me because I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to improve my time and range. And that situation messes up both of them.
Yeah. So my frustrations I've mentioned before is that, it's just that the unexpected highs or lows. If I go and eat a whole pizza and, and I go high, well, I'm kind of anticipating that. But if it's that I'm really trying my best and something else is going on, like, the pump isn't working, it's not like the infusion set's not quite right. I go high and I don't know why I'm high. I kind of have to stop everything I'm doing and trying to fix it. And then, like you said, you really, you can overcorrect and go low. And it's that time where you feel kind of out of control that, gosh, like, I know as much as I know, and I'm trying my best, and I'm still dealing with these kind of unpredicted highs or lows. And you just kind of feel sometimes like diabetes can get the best of you. And, I usually do a good job of getting back on track. But those are the times that I really just want to scream when it's just like, God, like, I'm really trying my best and I'm doing everything I know I know I should do. And Steve, we talk about this a lot. We're endocrinologists, like, for God's sakes, we should have perfect blood sugars, but there is no perfect. And I think it's helpful for people to hear that you and I have plenty of highs and lows and we do well overall, but gosh, like, this disease is tough. This is kind of the bottom line. So those are introductions. So hopefully that's given.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I'll just add one more thing to give people some fuel, to ask questions. But Kerri and I are both living with complications of diabetes, and that's kind of a thing that's in the background all the time for me. It's something that is with you all your waking hours. Sometimes I have nightmares about it, not too often, but that's a whole nother area besides the day-to-day. It's the fear of complications, and it's also living with complications.
And I'll tag on to that. And it's the maintenance of it. So my complications are related to my eyes, and I can't see them. I can't sense that they're deteriorating. So I have to keep going in to see my clinician to confirm that they're still screwball. And I'm like, no, this is the worst appointment ever because I have no idea what I'm walking into. And that can be an intimidating appointment to follow through on. So gripe.
Yeah.
All right, Schafer, what do we got?
So, I actually just wanted to start off by reading this sort of statement / question from Gail, and I won't read every full question like this, but I just thought it was well put, and I probably couldn't summarize it quite as well as she did. So she said, I was just typing this, and Kerri started talking about exactly this problem. I think the most frustrating part of this is the constant advocacy I have to do for myself to get the supplies I need without running out. The doctor is not responsive enough. The insurance companies need that pre-auth or prior auth they require over and over again. Our type 1 diabetes is never going away. So why do we need these every 3 months for some medications or devices? But it's so frustrating because not only do we have to try to manage this disease as our own medical doctor / human experiment, but then we have to deal with all the red tape surrounding it too. Any suggestions on how to make our way through this? Thanks. So just kind of mirroring exactly what Kerri said, and just that it never stops, and there's always these barriers, even outside of just getting through the day and taking control of your diabetes. It makes it harder.
Well, Schafer, you, Jeremy, and I, we live this every day in our clinics at UCSD. What is your answer to that question?
Well, as a provider, it's actually quite hard too. And so unfortunately, I'm not going to deflect this either, but there are a lot of system problems, and we run up these same things trying to get devices for people. We believe in CGM, we believe in pumps, new insulins, new treatments, and it's really hard sometimes just to get those for people. And so we spend a lot of our time and the staff in our clinics helping to do that. Not every office has the resources or the know-how to navigate that system. So I don't have much to say in terms of what to do about how frustrating it is, other than that you're doing the right thing by keeping on top of it. You have to be your own advocate and kind of fight for yourself, because ultimately no one else might do it for you.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing I had to add about this is that I don't know if this makes people feel better or not, but I deal with these frustrations myself as a patient, as a physician who can write my own prescriptions. I can write my own prior auths. I can call in my own refills, and still going to, CVS and, the prescription's not right, and getting a delay in medications, or still, things getting not approved through insurance. Steve, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago, there was this free app you could get called Action Movie, and I loved it. You could take a video of anything you wanted in life, and then you could add like a bomber coming in, like blowing it up. So Bill, I could have like a video of you talking, and then just have this like F-17 come and just blow you to smithereens. And I took a video of just CVS and just getting blown up, because I was so frustrated with dealing with like not being able to get my medications on time, people not understanding the urgency of, I can't wait till tomorrow to get my insulin or whatever it is. So, it's a way of saying that we all deal with these frustrations, and you really have to be on top of these things, even with very well meaning. Yeah, there
I
it is.
still have the app on my phone. It's awesome.
Me too.
Even with like well-meaning like practitioners and stuff, they could get your prescriptions wrong because the test strips aren't written quite right, or Lancets or whatever. So you really do have to advocate for yourself. I'll stop talking.
Oh no, stop.
Bill's
Yeah,
blown.
let's
I'm
go on.
opening up my Action Movie.
I have a question for Bill since he's distracted. I'm gonna get him refocused. This question was actually from Ann, and actually it says for Bill. So far, we've heard about anger and frustration. Could you say a bit about how you help type 1s deal with situational depression around diabetes?
Oh man, we're gonna switch to depression. I could do that. I think let me just segue from what we're talking about right now, though, because it is maddening when you feel like you're putting in your best effort with your health, and you feel like these systems are working against you or making it so hard. I mean, exactly what we're talking about dealing with these healthcare systems. And, one of the things, you can get aggravated and angry, and the other side of anger and aggravation often is depression. And depression is really when you feel like something difficult is happening or terrible is happening, and that your best efforts aren't fixing it. You end up feeling kind of powerless. That's the core feature of what depression is feeling out of control, feeling powerless. One solution is participating in TCYD today, actually. I mean, literally in my job, what I do every day is, how do we help people to regain a sense of control over their diabetes? Now, I think as Jeremy talked about his own experience, you're never going to manage it perfectly, but how do we help people kind of inch forward, to regain some success with managing different aspects of their diabetes piece by piece? That's really what we do when we're trying to address depression. We acknowledge that it sucks. We acknowledge that it can be hard for people from time to time. And we help people overcome that by regaining a sense of control over this disease, and not perfect control, but some sense of control, as all of you have done in your own lives.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else want to touch on that?
Kerri, you probably have something to say with that.
I always have something to say, but I find that the easiest way to deal with the stuff that frustrates me about diabetes is leaning way into the stuff that I find entertaining and funny. So like when we were talking about being on hold with different insurance companies, like how many of you know that Dexcom hold music by heart? Like if I asked you to sing it right now, Jeremy, you could totally do it, couldn't you? Okay.
I can. I've actually thought about putting it in videos before, because it's just ingrained in my head.
It is like
It just loops like every 12 seconds, and you're just like, oh man. Yeah.
And but then you like find yourself jamming out to it, which is really uncomfortable. And then also
It comes back
right?
around.
But then I remember calling the town hall where I live, and they put me on hold, and it was the same music. And I was like, oh my God. So I put it on, speakerphone for my family, and they're like, that's the Dexcom music. But like finding ways to laugh at the most irritating parts of diabetes, I find just alleviates a lot of the emotional burden. And so coming all the way back around to like the videos that you guys have done today, the fact that you're actually wearing togas at this toga party, like that levity goes a really long way in something that is with us for the long haul. So it's good to drag the funny stuff with us.
And can I just highlight what you just said, Kerri? And I think it's so appropriate for everyone here, that one of the other great solutions of dealing with aggravations and depression is anything we could do so that you don't have to feel alone. And I'm just thinking of how many people are going to just resonate with what you just said. It's nice to know you're not the only one dealing with this and they're aggravated, not just finding solutions, but just to know that you're not alone.
All right, Schafer, what's next?
So another question, from Brent says, can you talk about stress's impact on blood glucose? So, you know, a lot of times we talk about the impact of diabetes on our, you know, how we feel and the stresses that come with diabetes, but what about the reverse relationship, the stresses in life and other things? How do those affect our diabetes and our blood sugar? And specifically, this question was about stress, which I think is a good question, because a lot of times in the medical, you know, literature, we talk about stress increases blood sugars, but, you know, oftentimes we mean physical stress, like your body's sick or an illness or a heart attack or something like that, or getting COVID, like that will make your blood sugar go high. But a lot of times, you know, when we just talk about stress, you know, we're really talking about we're stressed out. And so what does that do to our blood sugars and how we kind of control them?
Well, I guess since I can say two things about that. One is we know, even though, as you said, Schafer, that physical stress, like surgery, for example, will clearly raise your blood sugars. Psychological stress is really different. And what we know are two things, that there are, as best as we can tell, there's some people who seem to be more stress sensitive. And so different kinds of significant psychological events and stress will raise their blood sugars. But for other people, it doesn't even have much effect at all. And that's one of the things that's so maddening as you think about trying to understand and make sense of it. People seem to be different, and it can be different in different situations in terms of a direct metabolic link between feeling stressed and blood sugar. But to be fair, there's almost always a pretty good relationship between psychological stresses affecting behavior, which then affect blood sugars. So if you're really overwhelmed and stressed out and fed up with life, we know you're more likely to blow off diabetes, eat everything in sight, not have time for any physical activity, forget about paying attention to glucose monitoring. So we can see that sometimes stress, because it's linked to behavior, is linked to problems with glucose control over time.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, there's kind of generalized free-floating anxiety that might be with people all the time. And then there's this, you know, like acute stressful events, panic attacks, whatever you want to say. And I've always wanted to put a CGM on myself before like a big talk and show it in real time, because my blood sugars go through the roof. And there's no doubt that when you have anxiety, when you're stressed about something and your adrenaline goes up, that raises your blood sugar. And that can be in a real event like that, like giving a talk or somebody puts a gun to your head or whatever, that's going to make your blood sugars go through the roof. But it might be minor of just, you know, waking up and you got, you know, something to do, like, you know, that can raise your blood sugar. So I think the idea is not to just perseverate that, gosh, I'm stressed out and this is like making my blood sugars go high and it's going to make me more stressed, like whatever. It's just realizing, yeah, that can affect your blood sugars. It's usually short term, and working on your mental health is important, because like, just like Bill said, there's two aspects of it: making your blood sugars better, but making your behaviors and all that, you know, better is important as well.
And I encourage everyone to try Jeremy's experiment, whether it's about whether you're about to give a talk or something else. And again, I just want to forewarn you, not everyone has that response. And we don't really know why that's true. Some people can give a big talk and feel exactly the same way you, Jeremy, and not see a glucose rise. And we don't understand.
I would 100% have a stress response if someone had a gun to my head. Like, we're not acknowledging that you said that, and everyone just glossed over the fact that that was the spectrum you put the stress on.
Well, they say that, you know, I've heard people say that they measure, like, you know, stress responses of people that are giving a big talk, or like, you know, they have some like life-threatening thing like a gun to their head, and it's the same. You know, people can react like violently, if you will, to some kind of normal situation, and that can affect your blood sugars.
Yeah.
I just wasn't ready for that specific range, so I just need to adjust.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a little bit like the lie detector test. You know, you have these things that measure things on your skin, and you ask them a question. If they're lying, you know, it's kind of hard to hold that back. But, you know, in the older literature, it was so silly. They would do a study by inducing stress to people with diabetes and measure their glucose. So their idea of stress was giving them complicated math questions, you know, and I think it's a hard area to study, because how do you make a stressful situation the same for every person that's in the study? And I think Bill said it right. You know, certain people deal with certain stresses better than others. And Jeremy, my blood sugars always go up if I'm giving a presentation and I'm super nervous about it. You know, maybe TCOID, where I've done it before, I got my own brethren out there, it's totally different. So I do believe that if I had a multiple choice question, the single biggest reason would be how stress affects their behavior, taking their shot on time, eating, exercising. So I think that explains the bulk of how stress affects glucose levels, other than like major surgery or something like that.
I want you guys to do an experiment to see. I want to see how your blood sugars rise right before you give a big talk to a big group of people and you're wearing nothing but a toga. Because I'm thinking that might have a bigger effect.
You'll have a bigger stress on our audience versus.
Yeah.
All right, I've seen Jeremy give a big talk and have a low in the middle of the talk. And that I'm sure in and of itself was stressful, but it's not just, it's not just having the highs, it's trying to prevent the highs. Or did you have time to eat breakfast before your stressful event or whatever else is going on in life, so that all adds to it too. Okay, moving on to another topic. So there's a couple questions that are kind of similar about, the stress of looking down the road for later on in life and being stressed about having type 1 diabetes at an older age, and whether that means there's, being concerned about that you maybe have some complications and those complications may get worse over time, and just having that hang over you, dealing with things like kidney disease and the, potential for having to go on dialysis and things like that are very serious. And then also just even if, without complications, just dealing with type 1 diabetes, at an older age. And hey, if maybe, you have any cognitive changes or things like that, like how do you manage this very complex disease later in life? So just I think some people are thinking forward, and that stress of the future can be felt right now.
Sorry, I don't have any experience there. Let the others go first.
I'm overwhelmed by your question, even.
Well, maybe this will help lead us. So one of the folks who brought this up said, my hope is that the technologies are just so great that it won't take as much management. And certainly, they cite CGM as an example of something that's really changed, their ability to manage their diabetes. So I think that is one, really important, hopeful aspect of where we are.
Well, Steve, why don't you tell us about your journey, with
Yeah,
complications in your mindset? I think would be helpful.
Well, I'll say one thing positive first, that I have a lot of older patients with type 1, and they do just fine. And yeah, if you have cognitive issues, that's a whole different story. But I got lots of 80-year-olds on hybrid closed loop systems, and you will adapt as you get older, unless you get dementia or something like that. Well, I would say for me, I felt like, I was invincible, like we all do. And, I've had type 1 51 years now, 52 almost. And, I did not have the best control in the very beginning. I was on 1 shot a day. It was urine testing, and I didn't have a diabetes doctor. I mean, I no excuses. That's just the situation. At some point, I started to develop complications. My very first one in medical school, actually, and which was a lot of protein in my urine. And then, it wasn't too bad. And then I would say in the last 5-6 years, I've had other complications, kidney issues, my eye issues, some issues with calcified arteries. And I do see good doctors, but I'll tell you what, I got hearing aids now, so I can hear everything now. And I'd say it's been a challenge for me, and, as these problems sort of stack up, I'm doing my best to see the experts and try to keep a good attitude. But I have to say, it is what's the right word for it? I'm not someone that gets depressed easily, but I'd say it can be depressing. It can cause a lot of, just internal stress, thinking about, what you could have done, but more like, what does the future hold? And hey, I could have a heart attack any second. My heart's in good shape, but still, it makes you think. I redid my will. I talked to Bill. I talked to Jeremy a lot, and I worry about overloading them with my issues, but I'm not sure if I spoke about it in clear terms, but just it is a concern as you get older and the complications sort of stack up. And many patients, you won't get complications depending on your degree of control, when you were diagnosed, things like that.
Yeah, Kerri, what do you think? You want to add to that, or?
It's just, it's weird to think that I have no concept of what it's like to age without diabetes. So I was diagnosed when I was 7. I'm 42 now, and next month I'll mark 35 years with type 1. And I like the things that are happening to my body or have happened throughout the course of the last 35 years. I don't know how to disassociate diabetes from any of that. So as I get older, it all just gets folded in such a way, but things get complicated, and there are different issues that I'm screening for and different concerns that I have. But one thing I'm absolutely sure of is that when I was diagnosed, I thought that when I turned 40, I would be a hot mess, and not in like a cute way, I would be very unwell, and just things would be not so good. And so when I turned 40 and I felt physically capable of continuing to like do what I'm doing, there was some empowerment that came with that. And I find that every day or week or anniversary or year that I mark, and I'm still forging ahead, even if there's other stuff that I'm kind of bringing along in the party with me, I still feel powerful in that way. And I'm definitely not like a Pollyanna, everything is perfect sort of person, but it does feel good to look at what I am still able to do and what I can still accomplish, even with diabetes presenting its different challenges. But like, I'm still here. And that goes for everybody else who's on this call, who's living with or caring for somebody with diabetes, or everybody at home who's looking, like, we're still here. And there's a whole lot of positive power baked right into that.
Yeah, I think.
Kerri, you are our kind of hot mess, okay?
I have not confirmed or denied if I am wearing pants either. That's become part of that, like, yeah, mess.
Well, I would say the only thing I would add to that is that, you know, there's still this perception that people, when they're diagnosed, that they will get complications. And, you know, that's changing. It's very different, you know, from now to when Steve was diagnosed, and in a good way, of all the developments in technology and things like that. And a lot of people listening will live, you know, a long, healthy life without complications. If you have them, you know, you can deal with them. But people just assume that it's going to happen, and that can obviously lead to depression. So the other thing I want to say on this topic is that I've noticed recently that when people come to see me with type 1 diabetes, other physicians in every other field love to ascribe something that they don't know to being a problem with diabetes. People will come to me and say, my knee hurts, and my primary care doctor told me it was because my blood sugars, or my stomach is upset and it's my blood sugars. And that's just not the case. You can have diabetes and other things that are normal, you know, so do your best to control your blood sugars. And if you're doing a good job, then, you know, it's not going to cause all these other like voodoo things. So that's just a comment I wanted to make.
And by the way, if it turns out it isn't diabetes, they get sent to me, and their doctor told them, well, it's just all stress. They have a real medical problem, but they said, don't worry, it's just all stress. And that often isn't true either. Can I just say that, you know, one of the advantages that someone like I have, and Schafer has, is that because we don't have diabetes, I don't have that kind of a diagnosis. So, you know, I'm sure we could make up a diagnosis for me, like pre-heart disease or something, but because I don't have to walk around with that label, I get to pretend, thinking about in the future, that everything's going to be just fine forever. And that's just as ludicrous as anything else, right? And I think having diabetes, you just sort of have this extra weight, right? That you're at risk for eventually running into some problems, and that your lifespan is going to be limited. And for Schafer, for me, I don't have to think about it as much, but it's just as true. And Jeremy, as you said, as we talk about all the time, you know, that we know that, again, with good care and effort, odds are pretty good. I don't want to say it's guaranteed that we're going to do what you're going to do well. Things have really changed over the years in terms of what's possible. And we have to just remind people that's true. We're not being overly Pollyannish. We're talking the facts.
Love it. All right, Schafer, where do you want to take us next?
Maybe just a couple, you know, comments and questions about, you know, really just kind of voicing frustrations, which I guess is what this is mostly about. Just all these great things that we talked about with advances in technology, of course, CGM, pumps, hybrid closed loop systems, and all these things that we're using. for those people who can get those things. And that's one issue, is that some people have access problems obtaining these. So sometimes that can be frustrating, I would guess, just watching us say how great they are and then not being able to get them, whether it's because of insurance or a provider who doesn't know about them or is unfamiliar. But these other concerns are about for people that even have these devices and still find, and they're better, they make life easier, but they're still a pain in the ass. And the sensors don't work, or, Jeremy mentioned, going high after you do a site change, or you're just waiting for the, the 2-hour warm up and you don't have the information that you need. And so even with these advancements and these great technologies, there's still a lot of frustrations, even just with using them. And I think, again, as someone who doesn't have diabetes, I mean, I get frustrated at my, internet connection and my cell phone not working. So I can only imagine what it's like, when your CGM doesn't work.
We're using an Android. We know why the phone's not working.
So I don't know. There wasn't a question. I think there's just kind of like, I don't know, how do you guys deal with those frustrations?
Common, issue. I don't know, Kerri, do you have something you want to start off with there?
I always go back to the same thing, finding community of people who understands what that's like, so you can gripe your face off to them and then feel better. That becomes like a running theme. Sorry, Steve.
No, I'm sorry. I would say this, there's a lot of resources out there that people do not know about, and they're not taken advantage of. So depending on what you need, let's say insulin, all the insulin companies have special, they can either give it to you free. There might be a little bit of paperwork with it. There are both Dexcom and Abbott have starter kits that you at least get experience with that. There are all kinds of resources for people with diabetes. There's an area on our website that talks about it. I'm sure JDRF and other diabetes related companies have those same areas. So I'd say look for help, because a lot of times you'll find it when you didn't think it was there.
Yeah, another thing I'll say on this topic is, Steve, you and I just did this video very recently on frustrations with CGM. And at first, I almost didn't want to do the video because I felt like, how dare we speak ill of this like amazing technology? And then it occurred to me, like, something can be amazing and have issues. Like, thank God for CGM, but like there's some things that can be frustrating about it. And just at least bringing awareness and attention to that. I think we're going to send that out pretty soon in our newsletter, right? About
our next newsletter,
connectivity issues and sensors failing and adhesive issues, like whatever. Those are all common frustrations, and I actually ended up really happy and glad we did that video. So
and then as Kerri mentioned, being put on hold when you're trying to get it fixed and listening to the wonderful music.
Oh yeah,
it's a jam.
I mean, I think it's pretty funny starting off with urine testing when there was no A1C machine, and then people are whining to me they don't want to wait the 2-hour warm up. I'm saying to myself, times have changed, and apparently the new G7 is less than an hour warm up. So,
a lot of what you guys are making me think about is just the power of expectations, right? So, I mean, we know if you're lucky enough to have a CGM, that, the international standards say the goal is you are an awesome success if your time in range is 70%, right? That you're awesome if you can get to 70%. What that means is you're going to have wacky blood sugars 30% every single day. And that's an expectation. And yet, once you actually have the right technology, when you're getting these hybrid closed loop pumps, when you're really doing great with your CGM, do you reach that 70% level of time in range and say, I made it, I'm good? No, you end up like Steve and Jeremy going, I've got to get to, if I'm not at 95%, I only made it to 90% today, damn it. And your expectations end up kind of working against you. And I think we forget, what does it mean to really be successful? Our expectations get away from us.
Schafer, what do you think?
There's a question on here. A couple people kind of mentioned, first of all, Marilyn says, I'm so glad TCYD exists, as I'm in an area where we have tried to have support groups over the years and it never works. So we're glad to hear that, Marilyn. And I think, that's part of a huge part of what, Steve has built here, and the rest of us try to support, I think, is just having a place for us all to get together, and even letting some of us losers in to kind of help. But I think that's one of the things that makes TCOID so great. But someone else asked, that, TCYD is good. There's groups on Facebook to build communities, but just kind of saying that it's been so hard, especially during the pandemic, to find people with diabetes, especially in person, and to have that sort of community, especially, locally in particular. So again, voicing that frustration, and also just raising the question if there's any ideas about way to find, a diet buddy or people locally that, to connect with.
I just got to add, Schafer, when people are complaining about, gee, it's hard to meet other people with type 1 diabetes in person during the pandemic. How about meeting anybody in person during the pandemic? So thank you. That was my complaint.
Yeah, that's a tough one. As COVID affects people with diabetes a little more aggressively, I did want to mention our Facebook for type 1, type 2, and type 3s. And we also have the networking lounge as part of the VFairs platform. But my strategy is you go to a candy store, you look for someone that looks really guilty and shifty looking around, or you listen, you walk around, listen for the 2 beeps or the 3 beeps, of a CGM going off. That's another clue too, but it's hard. But you know what? I remember, Jeremy, you just told me the story of you met someone at the park or something, you saw their pump or you heard that go off, and you're like instant diet buddies, just connected by the fact that you're living with diabetes. So yeah, that's tough. It's very tough. I don't have any great answers for that.
Yeah, Sim sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, we got a couple more minutes, Schafer. So maybe
Yeah.
last.
I was just gonna say, Sim just mentioned that TCYD could set up a diet buddy list similar to the old pen pals, which is kind of a cool idea. I know there's a lot of social options, but it may be a nice way to formalize it. Well,
Yeah.
So I think this is a good question that Gail brought up, something that we talk about all the time in type 2 diabetes, but don't focus on, I don't think, nearly enough in type 1 diabetes, and that's weight gain and dealing with weight issues. And again, I think this is one of those things that even as a provider, I see this bias out there that people with type 1 are supposed to be young and skinny. And so it's almost like, the fact that type 1s can also deal with weight gain is just something we don't talk about, and a lot of providers don't think about it. So, this question is, the connection with diabetes and taking insulin and, sort of fighting against weight gain when you're trying to control your blood sugars. And then, this person also mentions Ozempic, which is a GLP-1 medication that is approved in type 2 diabetes that does help with weight loss, but is not approved in type 1. So some people use it off label, but it's not really approved. So there's all these tools also for type 2 diabetes that aren't specifically available for type 1.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say there. So I think, we all think about our weight a lot. It's something that, it's ever present in my mind. And when I'm thinking about a meal to eat with carb content, the effect on my weight is just as prevalent as the effect on my blood sugars, if not more prevalent. And just realizing that 2 out of 3 people with type 1 diabetes in the country are either overweight or obese. And there's reasons for that. One, like the country is just getting fatter for various reasons. But with people with type 1 diabetes, think about it. You're taking insulin. That can make you go hypoglycemic. You have to, eat food when you don't want to sometimes. It can make it very difficult to exercise, because you're managing highs, lows, things like that. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to the gym and got in the parking lot and I was low and just like, gotta go to McDonald's, like whatever, to like go eat or drink something and not work out. So there's reasons that it can be stacked against us. So the solutions, unfortunately, are not different than people without diabetes, or maybe that is fortunately, that it's, kind of healthy living, exercise, all those types of things. The medications that the type 2s can use, GLP-1s and SGLT2s, they do work in people with type 1 diabetes, specifically in terms of weight loss. They're not FDA approved, but you can use them in select kind of situations. So it's worth mentioning to your provider. And actually, some of these medications, the GLP-1s now, are specifically indicated for obesity, regardless if you have diabetes or not. So if you actually are, significantly overweight or in the obese category, you can use these medications specifically for weight loss. So that is changing. and changing very rapidly. So that's something also to just be aware of. I think it's kind of a weird place to end, but we got to kind of wrap it up. All I'll say is like, maybe we can go around the horn, like one quick positive comment or something, kind of concluding remarks from, we'll start with you, Steve.
Yeah, I would just say what I picked up today is you really have to be your own advocate. You got to go out and find friends, fight the insurance companies, find a good doctor that is flexible enough to prescribe you Ozempic and understands the benefits. May also have cardiovascular benefits as well. And please take advantage of this technology, because Jeremy and I have a friend came to his young son's birthday party. He's a type 1. He was having severe hypos. He was totally resistant to putting a CGM on his body. And now he is the poster child for CGM. And it's already made a huge difference in his life in a couple of days. So be flexible. Don't get stuck in your ways. Reach out to people and stay in touch with us at TCOID.
All right. Well, maybe we are past time. So Kerri, Bill, let's just assume that you said something very profound.
You can count on it.
People's lives.
I'm sorry. I hogged the ending.
No, I think it was me. And Schafer, thanks for, you know what? I think we got to get rid of this like diabetes loser thing, because I think it's much more difficult for Schafer, you and Bill to be a part. And I'm always blown away with how you guys can really just insert yourselves seamlessly without having the disease. So I think you're diabetes winners.
Well,
Thank you.
Bill's an honorary diabetic, so don't include him.
So it's just Schafer.
Yeah. Schafer, we're going to get you the award at our next ceremony.
Great.
Well, thanks, Kerri and Bill, and obviously Steve Schafer, and everybody enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye all.
guys.